Hey guys, today I'm excited. I have here with my friend Anna Hines, or Anna King now. Sorry.
That's all good.
Yeah. So how I know you, it's a little complicated. I think I grew up, started being homeschooled, and I knew about Christ in the Arts, which is what production that you were involved in, that your family started, and a lot of people. I started going to Kingdom Prep or private school, and a lot of people that were in that also were in Christ in the Arts. So I didn't directly know you, but I knew about you, and then I think when Katrina was engaged to your brother, I kind of got to know him a little bit more. And so we're always kind of in the same circles, but not quite. And I guess it was only until recently when I went to one of your yoga, what do you call it? Yoga classes.
I think it was a yoga in the park.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was great. It was outside.
Awesome.
It was beautiful. And then, we met and we talked, and so we got to know each other a little more. And so I really love the things that you're passionate about. And so I thought it'd be great to have you on and talk about those things.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Kendall. I love chatting about all of the intricacies of the mind-body connection and making friends with the body and all things health and wellness. And it's just fun to have conversation, really authentic, vulnerable, honest conversation about the real stuff of life. And so I appreciate you inviting me. And I know we got to sit down, over coffee a few weeks ago, and I kind of got to ask you your story a little bit, and you got to ask me a little bit about mine. And it was really refreshing because it's been a long time since I've been able to really dive into the story sort of from the origins till now.
Right.
And so it was really fun to, I'm not used to being on this side of the being asked the questions. I'm usually the question asker. So this is refreshing. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I just want to say that you're great at what you do and asking questions and holding space for others to tell their story. So I really appreciate that. And I also love to do the same thing. So
awesome. So great. Yeah. Well, I know we have a lot of fun things to dive into today. So.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, let's dive in. So from the context of making friends with your body and kind of the direction we wanted to go on this podcast, for me, I think I have kind of an interesting background because my parents were early adopters of some ideologies that are much more acceptable now, but 40 years ago they were not.
It was much different back then.
Yeah, it was very different back then. And they've always been seekers, and I've always really appreciated that about them. And they came from a Church of Christ background and kind of a more of the mindset of the basic script in life, and they were really willing to look at, is this truly life-giving, and is this truly God's path for us? And so I was born into a culture that was being created that was not typical. And so that has, of course, its pros and cons,
Right.
because you're all kind of trying to work through it together. But my parents got into health right around the time I was born, actually. My twin sister and I had some major, I would say major, for us it was major health issues that really pushed my parents towards looking at alternative options.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so the doctors would say, well, they just have this, and my parents would go like, what is that? And let's look at the deeper root cause. So my dad especially is really passionate about what's the underlying thing going on and what's the root cause.
I love that.
And that's something that I'm very passionate about and that I've always appreciated about him. And so so they started changing their diet. They started, and even prior to when I was born, they were spiritually seeking. And so they were doing a lot of home church type things. And, my dad being in the Church of Christ, he had had a spiritual experience that left him really just seeking and open. And unfortunately, the people he was trying to get answers from as to what was happening, those people were didn't really know how to help him, and so he had to kind of go beyond the reef, so to speak,
Right.
and look for answers more broadly than he was used to. And so they were already spiritually seeking, and then this health journey was introduced to them, and then on top of that, every part of our life was sort of looked at from what's the most life-giving. So at the time, they decided to homeschool us, and so that is, I have, lots of, I think a really good foundation in many ways, but it was just definitely not the script. It was very different. And so again, pros and cons. There's not one right way, but it's definitely part of my story.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's got to be maybe less stable because, you're all seeking and you're not set on your beliefs or way of living or whatever, but there's more freedom and openness and maybe curiosity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have some really great memories of the process of kind of finding what we were looking for, not just, here's what we know is true and we're just going to kind of stick to that. And I'm definitely much more of I'm always looking for, like, what's the deepest truth about something, and maybe pushing the envelope a little bit further, a little bit earlier sometimes than maybe even some people are comfortable with.
Right.
But I always appreciated getting to be part of that process of growth and change. And it got a little messy too.
Right.
There was a season of our life that things were not stable and they were very messy. There was some health issues that we were dealing with, and we were kind of in survival mode for a while. And so I do remember the first 10 years of my life being really just kind of happy and free and good and very, very life-giving and very organic. And then we were involved in a church group that was kind of I would say now that you would probably call it a cult, Wow. It was very weird, and we got out of it as quickly as we could, but that definitely had a negative impact on a spiritual level, at that early age. And then my mom went through a really rough time because she went through a traumatizing birth with a seventh child who passed away. And so after that, I would have been, 9 at the time. After that were what we call the tornado years. Everything
years.
was very messy.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm right in the middle of all of the things that my parents are trying to process through and going through those traumas and trying to heal from them and figure out what's going on. And my mom kind of almost had a nervous breakdown, and it was really messy and it was really bad. And so I didn't really know how to navigate emotions in the teenage years, and I felt very confused about my emotions and about my body and about what's going on.
Right.
So in my kind of teenage years, I developed an eating disorder that I think, when I look back, maybe you wouldn't necessarily call it a clinical eating disorder, but it was very obsessive to me. It kind of, it took up so much headspace and took up so much energy that I remember not really being able to enjoy my life and even understand, who I am and even know what I love, So that was a really challenging time for me, and that really carried on through my 20s and into sort of mid-20s. I had just kind of developed a lot of obsessive patterns, and I just didn't like myself. There was just lots of self-hatred.
Right.
And I think what's interesting is that people would probably look at me from the outside and think, she's got it all together, or things are good for her, or she's a happy person, she loves Jesus, and she, has health and all that, and everything should be fine. And so from the outside, it was all looking great, but on the inside, things were just not good. And so I do feel like that was the catalyst, though, that search and that struggle and that sense of things are just not right that really pushed me towards moving further than what the tools were at the time that we had to work with in terms of healing. Because I've always just been passionate about healing. That's just been something that's been, I think, not only bred in me, but also it's just in my spirit to do that in the world, to be a part of facilitating healing or creating the environment where people can heal on whatever level. But the programming, I think that I wasn't aware that I was functioning in for those teens and 20s was, if you have a problem, you need to deal with it spiritually and physically, which I'm really glad it wasn't just spiritually, because I see a lot of people, at least in maybe the Christian culture, say, you just need to pray about that. But there's not tools given.
Right.
And that I feel very passionate about talking about, at least at some point in this, because, it leads to even more condemnation and frustration. If someone's telling you, you just need to pray about that, or maybe you should repent, or maybe you should try harder.
Right.
And there's not tools to interpret the physical and emotional symptoms that you're getting.
Yeah, so it's like maybe you're doing there's something wrong with you, but not like it's something that's just a wound that needs to be healed, but it's you're wrong. You're and then if it doesn't get better, then what's wrong with you? Instead of maybe there are tools that you could be taught. You're just ignorant, that you don't know about to help yourself out, and also not, just pray about it. That it's almost in a way taking away your power, and what can you do to work on it as well. But
exactly,
also that it's not necessarily all your fault that this is happening. It's just something you need to work through.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I interpreted all of these problems or issues as there's something wrong with me.
Right.
I am either a willpower weakling, or I am at my core. Something's messed up, maybe even beyond repair, right? And when you have that mindset and you don't really know that these things, these symptoms or these issues or these problems are messengers trying to get your attention to lead you towards transformation, then you interpret it as something's wrong with you.
Right.
So you're exactly right. And what I like to say to people is symptoms that you're getting, they're just information.
Right.
They're not condemnation. They're leading to transformation. So information, not condemnation, leading to transformation. And if people can just remember that, then, or at least begin to try to absorb that idea, then we can step out of the that heavy mindset of there's must be something wrong with me. Why can't I get it together? Right.
And something I've heard, and you tell me if this is right, but about eating disorders is it's a striving for control. And so you're describing your teenage years and early adulthood, and your parents are going through a lot. So maybe they're not there for you as much as you need, especially, we know that teenage years are destabilizing and it's hard for anybody to deal with. And so it's kind of a culmination of that natural thing, plus your parents going through what they went through. And so it's a very uncontrolled stage. And so that's maybe unconsciously your body is saying, how can I take control?
Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely is a control thing. And, there's 7 kids in my family.
Right.
And and there's a lot of, there is a lot of needs and a lot of, challenges. And of course I have like now, since I'm a parent, I have the deepest respect for my parents and all parents out there, because it's suddenly you're, this new being is sort of thrust in your life, and you don't know this being, and you're trying to figure out how do I help this child, become the best that they can be. And it's just a lot. And then if you put health issues on top of that, it's even more complex. So, but yeah, I think I needed a lot more navigation through my emotional life. And I needed a lot more just understanding of what was going on inside of me. But thank goodness it was pushing me towards finding some tools, you know? And so that's why I think anything and everything can be redeemed. Like we don't need perfect parents. We need just opportunities along the way to discover what are some tools and mindsets that will bring us most in alignment with life, you know? And that is, that's really what I love to talk about. And so the eating disorder really continued the I would say kind of emotional shutdown. I really was kind of head down, wings out in terms of just trying to kind of stay on the straight and narrow and be a good person and be who God wants me to be. But I was trying to fix everything with just nutrition, which anything nutritional obviously is going to help in lots of ways. But it wasn't the end all in terms of, it wasn't what my body was calling for. And so, what I began to discover was that the eating disorder and my body image issues and all of these emotional issues that I was having, it really wasn't about the symptoms or the eating disorder or the food itself. It wasn't about any of that. It was about emotions that I didn't know how to process. It was about beliefs that I didn't know how to process. And it was about learning how to, again, come more in alignment with who I was meant to be and how I was meant to function in the world. And those quote unquote issues were actually leading me towards the right path. So in that way, you can say we can be grateful for any issue that comes our way, because if we're open, it'll lead us exactly.
Yes.
Where we need to go.
Right. Yeah. That's great.
So in my kind of mid to later 20s, I'm trying to remember what year this was, but I discovered a modality called Theophostic Prayer Ministry. And at the time, it was something actually that my dad discovered, and he was like, hey, I think there's this thing you might be really interested in, and there's this meeting, you can go with me. And anyway, we checked it out, and it was essentially a therapist who had learned a new way of working with any traumas or just the inner work. And he was a therapist who had done a lot of work with trauma, but he was not seeing the results. And so God really showed him if you can just do that same process that you're doing, but when you layer all the way down from emotions to memories to beliefs, instead of inserting the truth, why don't you just let me talk to that person? So that was what God was essentially showing him. Why don't you just ask me, like, what's the truth about this? And so this guy did that, and he just had incredible results. People would have what they would call like maintenance-free victory, meaning they could have struggled with some sort of big trauma for years and years and years. And then they would do this process, and in one session, they would see like, oh, I know the truth now. And I just am not having to struggle anymore. So I was really drawn to it. I did not know the first thing about emotional intelligence. Not the first thing. And I thought I was doing pretty good. Like I really thought I'm good. Like I'm pretty smart. I'm pretty, emotionally aware. I was not. I had no idea how shut down I was. But in order to be the facilitator for this process, you had to obviously do your own work. And so they would match you. Do what?
I said, oh man.
Yeah, I know. I was like, this will be fine. I don't have that much to work on. So I literally, I like to tell this story on myself because it's so funny, but I literally sat down with my facilitator who was going to work with me on my stuff, and I said, I've honestly had a really great life. Obviously that was dissociated, but I mean, I have had a lot of really great things, but not taking into account these major emotional issues I'm having. And I was like, I've honestly had a really good life. I don't really know if there's much here, but I'm open and yada yada. And the facilitator just had the sweetest eyes, and she just kind of looked at me and just kind of nodded, and she said, okay, we'll see. And I was not prepared. And I was not prepared for what would ensue, but it was wonderful and it was very freeing. But it's hard work,
Right.
when you have to confront the beliefs that you didn't even know you had, or the memories that are unprocessed that you didn't even know were there, or the surprising things that come up,
And the unconscious. Yeah.
In the unconscious. I didn't even know what the unconscious
Right,
was.
right.
I didn't even know what subconscious mind was. So anyway, we do this process several years. I got my own healing and in lots of ways, and then I became a facilitator and did that for a while. And so really in my later, I guess it was somewhere around 30, I was really enjoying the theophostic process, but I was noticing that it just took a little too long. Like it was sessions would be 2-ish hours maybe, and it felt like some of it felt too hard. If someone had really clear traumatic experiences, sometimes it would actually go a little bit faster because there was a clear memory,
Right.
a clear thing that happened, and they would receive really clearly from the Holy Spirit. It would be very straightforward. But if it was someone like me who hadn't had like what we would call like trauma, as in like big T trauma,
Right.
Big T trauma are the things we think of that are quote unquote trauma. I had a lot of little T trauma, meaning things that were hiding in the closets of my unconscious mind. And my little T traumas were very surprising to me because I had no idea how much they had affected me and how much they were locking me down emotionally and keeping me from really being my truest self in life. So I was noticing that I was getting some good healing, but I was also noticing this pattern of not only for myself, am I not fully getting where I need to go? On a emotional level, I'm not quite. There's some things missing here, but I'm noticing the people that I'm working with that there is that same dynamic. So I just felt like, okay, there's got to be more here. And that led me, and the other thing was I couldn't heal my eating disorder. I would get a lot of truth about, truth from God that felt very, very freeing, lots of visions, really neat stuff. But I knew all about my triggers. That was the other thing. I knew all about my triggers. I knew what they were. I was clear on them. I had like the mind map of like, here's the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I wasn't actually healing.
Embodied.
I wasn't embodied.
You know mentally what's going on, but if your body isn't connected to that and it's embodied, then you're still not going to get anywhere.
Exactly. So if that doesn't translate into the nervous system and into the body, then it's just not fully. It's not all there,
Right.
And I just was like, I know that Jesus came not just for our spirit, but for our mind and our body. So we don't need to leave that out, right? And I think I had definitely left that out, or I just didn't know how to utilize it. So anyway, so I started really going down the track of what are some things that might actually help me heal at this deeper level. So the first thing that I found was something called EFT tapping, which I use to this day, emotional freedom technique. And that was actually the first thing that really helped me with the eating disorder, because I had a tool in the moment that I didn't have to wait for my facilitator to work with me, and I had and it actually like connected to the autonomic nervous system and connected to the body.
Right.
So I could be triggered and I wouldn't just stay in my head kind of trying to figure out where this trigger was coming from and what the belief might be and blah, 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 blah. I actually was able to dial down the stress response and get back into a homeostasis. And so that was the first time that I noticed this, like, oh, I'm actually getting something to connect into the body and into the deeper mind. So the EFT tapping was a really big thing. Actually, my sister Laura found it. I have to give her credit. I discovered a cool modality called emotion code.
So you found that?
I found emotion code
wow.
and she found the tapping.
That's funny.
Oddly enough, we are both doing these modalities, but it's flip flopped. So.
Right. Now you do the tapping and she does the motion.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. And she's so gifted at it. She's really, really good. But anyway, all that to say, that modality was really helping me. And I started getting into more somatic work. So somatic, being the work that is helping you integrate into the body. And for some people who've had trauma, whether it's big T or little t, or they just kind of get stuck in their head, which is, I think, a lot of the Western world. Yeah, totally get it. Right there with you. Actually becoming embodied, meaning being able to even feel your whole body and be safe and comfortable and feel the body. Or be able to notice when the body's giving you a signal and to know what to do with that signal or know what to do with that symptom. I started really exploring more of the somatic work. So the EFT tapping, I became a yoga teacher. I guess this was about, let me think, almost 10 years ago. And I started learning meditation.
I think that was my first introduction to the body, even though it can be, you can do it, I guess it depends on the type of meditation.
Yeah.
You can do it very spirit, I guess, where it's beyond the body, but you can do it very body focused and focus on the feelings and stuff of the body.
Yes.
That's like the starting place of it. And that really helped me.
That's awesome. Yeah. The traditional yoga nidra, you some people might know it by names like iRest, or it's a somatic meditation. That is kind of like a mindfulness meditation. Yoga nidra can be really helpful for people actually learning how to feel their body.
Right. Yeah.
And I did lots of that too.
Another name for
yes,
the focus on the body.
Yeah. Yeah. So those kinds of meditation can be really good for just learning how to feel again. Because some people, it's like kind of having to like melt the ice,
Right.
Is kind of how it feels. Like I'm disconnected. I'm sort of cut off at the neck, So as you can imagine, like all of those things, like working through those things, they're helping me be able to not just feel and sense, but know what to do with those things as they arise.
Right.
And so every aspect of my life began to change. Like my relationship with food began to change, my relationship with exercise, my relationship with my body image, just what I see when I look in the mirror, when I see pictures. Before, it was absolute self-hatred. Like it was so much criticism and so much discomfort. And so doing that work feels like connecting to wholeness. I'm whole. I feel so much more whole every single day, and it's just an ongoing process of feeling that lightness and that life and that love, not just in my spirit, but then in my body and in my conscious mind and in my subconscious mind, like all of it, not just one piece of it, And so I'm just very passionate about that kind of integration and that wholeness in every part. So, yeah.
So I have a question. I mean, you grew up in Christ in the arts and dance and stuff like that. And obviously that's very, you're working with the body. So how do you think that affected, or did that make things worse or better, or was it kind of both?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I danced. Yeah, I left that part out of the story, but yeah, I danced for about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years. And it was very challenging. Like, I really do have a heart for dancers because there is not only the stigma of the type of dancer body that you're supposed to have in order to be valuable, but you're in a leotard and tights, in front of a mirror all the time. Like, that is a recipe for lots of self-criticism and lots of body shaming. And in traditional or more typical dance programs, there's a lot of there's a lot of pressure, and there's lots of eating disorders that go around in those dance communities, and lots of issues. And I've worked with some of those dancers, and it's really challenging because on one hand, they're, maybe they have a supportive parent that's trying to tell them, we love you for who you are and all that. But then, or even a dance teacher that is saying that, but then there is the unspoken message, of you need to be thinner, you need to look a certain way, you need to look this way in a costume, whatever.
It's hard to fight culture at
Absolutely.
large. Yeah.
It is. It's a big, like really big challenge. And so of course Christ in the Arts is really big on like supporting wellness and health as the primary thing, and really honoring all body types and supporting that. And so I'm really grateful for that. But growing up, you know, just even if it was the healthiest environment it could possibly be, but it's still challenging,
Right.
you know?
Got it.
And so I do think that for me, I was already, I mean, I don't think it would have mattered what like sport or art I was in. I was already just disconnected from my body. I was just sort of chopped off at the neck, like in terms of sensing and feeling. And so I just was very much up in my head.
I mean, that's what trauma does in general, right? It's
does,
like,
yeah.
because trauma is stored in the body. So whenever you get trauma, if you don't deal with it, then it numbs your body, and so you're disconnected to it, right?
Exactly. That's precisely right. Yeah. That was a huge aha moment for me when I realized trauma is stored in the body. And of course, if you feel the discomfort or the stress or the anxiety in the body, you're going to try to get out.
Right.
You're going to divert, you know, and you're going to try to find something that makes you feel less uncomfortable, less stressed. And everyone kind of has their thing, right? And for me, it was like fixating on an eating disorder. And for some people, it's like it's going to be maybe something like drugs or alcohol, but it might even be like social media, or it might even be shopping, or it might even be, you know, being a perfect performer. Like people are going to fixate on something, and it doesn't really matter how it looks, but it's still a diversion from what's really going on.
Right.
So
That's
yeah.
good.
Yeah. All right. Where should we go from here?
Well, so do you want to talk about, I guess, how it started? You back to the story of you found tapping, and I guess where you went as far as like what you were doing with your life and how you became healthy.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, so in terms of more specifics on how the like becoming healthy happened, you know,
It's a process.
you've probably seen that visual that says like what I thought healing looked like, and it's like a straight upward incline, like it's just straight up, and then what healing really looks like, and it's like this crazy squiggly line that goes up and down and all around, and you just think, where am I going and what is happening, you know? And that really is more indicative of the process, but it is ever upward, which is good, you know? But I definitely had some, you know, when you're kind of at the front lines in your subculture of trying to figure this stuff out, like you take some detours and try to, you know, and so I definitely had like these times where I didn't feel like everything was fully healthy or I was on the straight and narrow, but I was exploring. So I was exploring anything I possibly could to try to figure out, like, where's the truth? Like, where's the healing here? And is there something about this, even if man has taken it and sort of messed with it a little bit, is there some level of truth here? And so I'm really grateful for all of those even detours, because they were very helpful for me to come back kind of to center. But in terms of more specifically, if someone's like, where do I even start? You know, how do I heal? And I would say, you know, like the first thing I think is we do have to hold the paradox of understanding that we are at the deepest level already whole and complete and perfect, and there's a part of us that has already arrived. Yeah. And learning how to drop into that, you know, whether that's through meditation or prayer or any kind of somatic experience, learning how to drop into that and come to a sense of peace about where you are right now, and learning self-love is vitally important. Because it can be very easy with all the tools and all the modalities to get into fix-it mode. Right. You know, like constantly looking for how do I fix myself, even if it all looks like noble and good. Just there can be a tendency to kind of get stuck in that fix-it mode. So I think we have to hold the paradox of absolute like self-love and acceptance, and also the understanding that when we're doing healing work, we're helping the mind both the conscious, the iceberg above the surface, so to speak, and the subconscious, the iceberg below the surface that, becomes the autonomic nervous system and informs the body. We have to help those parts and the body itself get on board with the truth.
Right.
So
be like, oh, I want healing, but your body's like, no.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or some people feel like, okay, they're on one side or the other. They're like, I'm already whole and I'm already perfect and everything's good, and they don't actually work on anything, right? So they're very in touch with maybe their identity in Christ or their surrender. They've got that going for them, which is really good. But the imbalance of it is if they've got all these symptoms trying to get their attention, right? Symptoms in their body or emotional symptoms such as stress or anxiety or things aren't working in their life. And they can kind of over spiritualize it or whatever. And I'm like, don't over spiritualize it. Just like know that yes, who you truly are is already whole and perfect and complete. And there is these other aspects of you that need the transformation, need the love, need the attunement, need the listening, And so, you could also have someone who is flipped and someone who's so into like the tools and healing and working on things and clearing past patterns and clearing blockages and all the things, but they're not in touch with that true self and that connection to Holy Spirit and that identity in Christ. Are not really in touch with that. So I find that people tend to be sometimes in one place and not the other when we really do have to hold the paradox of both at the same time, right? And so being able to hold the paradox of I am whole and I am like at this deep level, I'm already good. And that took a while for me to come to, honestly. I remember having a moment where I was really struggling with my body image and really just struggling, I wasn't really struggling with the eating disorder anymore, but I just didn't really like the way my body was, and it was just still it had I guess I'll use the word stronghold. I don't know if I like that word or not, but it still had a hold on me, but I was really struggling with it. And I'd had a session where it's like I just had to like grieve that this is the way my body wanted to be, like I had to just let go of, if my body never changes, if it's just the way it is, and I have to come to full acceptance of it, can I live my life? Can I be fully present in the world? And can I just absolutely love and accept who I am right now? And it was really hard because I could feel all of this stuff rising up that's like, no. You can fix yourself. You can be someone different. And I had this ideal in my mind of what I should look like and who I should be. And I felt like God, it was almost like it was sort of a misty kind of picture of who I thought I should be. And it's like it just floated away. And it was this really good image visual of like, you've got to let this idea in your mind of who you think you should be, especially who you think what your body should look like. You've got to let that go so that you can really embrace the life that you're meant to live and the truth of who you are.
Right.
And so if you let that go, you'll be a whole lot happier, Yeah. So that was kind of a pivotal moment for me of just, and I really honestly don't know if anyone else around me understood how big it was. It was huge. It was like this moment of, okay, if nothing ever changes in my body and I just focus on being healthy, but I let go of this like idealism, you know what I'm saying? Right. This idealism of I'll be more valuable if I look like this, or if I'm perfect, quote unquote, whatever that means. So yeah, does that?
Yeah, that's great. That's beautiful. I think there's another paradox of when we let go of having to be this image, which, like you said, often is more hazy than we think. Oh, I want to be this, but we don't even know what that is. Then actually we can change more than when we were striving to become this image, which we didn't even know. But of course, like you're saying, there's always limits, and we have to reconcile with what God gave us, what we are. And so there's that, again, that surrender and that push. Like, don't just be satisfied and content staying the way you are. You want to keep moving, but also surrendering to what God has for you, which is probably better than what you want, what your image.
That is 100% true. Yeah, right on. So, and I'm really glad you said that, because what is interesting is as soon as I let go of that like image of who I thought I should be, I begin to notice that whatever did need to shift began to shift, like naturally and organically and slowly, kind of like, nature like shifts and grows and changes, but it happens so slowly that we really don't even notice. It's almost imperceptible shifts. And I think we have to think in terms of change, the right kind of change happening like that, sort of slowly and almost imperceptibly. Oh, I know, right?
Yeah, I'm
Same.
so impatient. I, what you're describing before, like, oh, you want to change, you want to heal, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, I want it. I want it all right now.
Totally.
And then I'm warring with my body, which is like, no, I need you to slow down and nurture me and take care of me and go slower. And so,
yes.
Yeah. And when I finally surrender into that slow process, then the change actually happens.
Yeah. What I really found is that the body cannot heal in stress response. It can only heal in relaxation response. So another way of saying that is, the what it is that we're really looking for, we can only find it when we are tapped into peace. And so even on just a basic physiological, psychological level, when our system's in stress response, it kind of stunts, not kind of, it does, it stunts the healing work of the body. And so the signal that the nervous system is getting when we're in stress response and we're even like really trying hard or striving hard, that stress signal that's sent to the body is communicating to it that it's not a time to heal. It's a time to fight, fight, flight, freeze, like it's time for maybe retreat. It's a time for not doing anything, or it's a time for like fighting back, right? And so the processes, the millions of processes that happen in the body, those processes are not healing to the body when we're in stress response. And so it's actually counterintuitive. But lots of people don't know that because we have a push harder, strive harder, perform better mindset in our society. It's like if you want something, you got to go after it. And my watch cry is like, actually, when you learn how to work with your body, you learn how to calm the nervous system, you learn how to come into love and in alignment with the body, then it begins to work for you, not against you.
Right.
And the nervous system goes, when you're in that peace mode, the nervous system begins to heal and restore and repair so much faster.
Right.
The heart, when it's in stress response, it's in chaos, it's incoherent. And when that incoherence goes into the brain, it even makes the brain kind of be more chaotic, and you're stressed, you're anxious, and you're kind of like monkey mind and scattered and all those things. But when the heart is coherent, whenever you're feeling love and gratitude and joy and freedom, and you are feeling good about your life, right? Then that sends a coherent signal to the brain, and the brain becomes more orderly, and that sends a signal to the body, and the body becomes more orderly. And it's very exciting because it is a win-win on all levels. But we have to change our paradigm.
Right.
We have to look at it from a different lens.
Yeah, I have to find, it's hard to, like if I'm in meditation and I'm doing a body scan, if I'm feeling all this pain, it's you have to find some sense of like you said, peace or good feeling, and then bring that to where you feel bad in your body. And if you just focus on the bad alone, then it's hard to do anything with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in the work that I do, and there's lots of different ways of doing it, so I love all the modalities, and I think they all are valuable in the different ways. In the work that I do, what we do want to do is look at pain as a messenger, and say, what is it trying to say to me? and ask it the questions like, what's your message? Is there something that you're trying to get my attention about? Now, sometimes we have to just rewire that. It actually doesn't have a message except that the brain and body have become wired towards pain. And that's a very fascinating topic because people can actually be experiencing pain. And I have several clients that I've worked with who have gotten out of chronic pain, that the brain can actually be creating something that has nothing to do with a physical issue in the body. So typically it's a negative or critical or sort of emotional program or pattern that has been ensconced in the body, and it's just replaying it. So the body works in those patterns and those programs, and so we kind of have to learn how to rewire, repattern, and understand what is the message that the symptom is trying to say to me. And so I think that's a very fun, fascinating, interesting process for each person.
And I think that sometimes people can get scared of actually not feeling this pain because it's what they're used to. And also, like I know myself, in grad school, I was so pushed to complete my work out of fear and anxiety and imposter syndrome, all this stuff. And so I really worked on getting rid of that stuff. And once I did, then I was like, oh no, now where's my motivation? So it's then cultivating the good feelings that help you complete things,
Absolutely.
So you can be scared of like, oh, I don't want to get rid of these negative things because they're what pushed me forward and help me function in life in a weird way.
Absolutely. Yes. So there's something I teach in my work called crossing the bridge from survival mode to creation mode. And in short, we are kind of programmed in this culture, and it's really sort of reinforced to live in survival mode, which survival mode is like, stress and anxiety and shame and guilt and fear. And we tend to be driven by those things because that's how we know, or that's sort of the energy or the motivation that we're used to using. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I made it through. Right. Or I need fear in order to make the right decision. Or maybe I feel like I need stress in order to accomplish a task, right? And so that is a kind of energy, but it's a very detrimental kind of energy.
It's like a short term because it's going to burn you out and it's going to, like you said, make you fly,
yes,
freeze.
Exactly. And from an energetic standpoint, it's a very low vibration, so it's very hard on the body over time. The body wants the high vibration. It wants that high frequency. So I tell people, okay, so let's imagine that survival mode is a mountain, and you're standing on that mountain, and that could be the mountain that you decide to die on, or you can cross the bridge. Not everyone decides to cross the bridge, but if you do, there's all this support, right? And you can imagine that there's a suspension bridge from survival mode all the way across to what I call creation mode. And creation mode is the mountain that we all want to live in, right? And as often as possible. And creation mode is characterized by gratitude and love and peace and lightness and freedom and all of these things that we are wired to feel. That's our natural state, right? And so, but crossing the bridge is a very real challenge. And if you've ever been on a suspension bridge, the first time I crossed a suspension bridge, I was 5 years old, and we went to Tennessee, and there was this really cool suspension bridge, and the first step off felt very wobbly, especially to a 5-year-old. And I thought, is this thing going to break? Like, what's going to happen?
Right.
And that's exactly the feeling that you have when you step off of survival mode. The first thing you feel is fear of the unknown, right? Or fear of what's going to happen if I am trying to use a different energy to keep me motivated in life, or I'm going to not operate out of this old survival mode pattern, but I'm going to try to move into some new energy, right? And so what typically happens for people is they're doing the work to try to cross the bridge, and they get to the center of the bridge, and I call that the gray zone. And the gray zone is like, I don't feel bad anymore, but I feel a little bit like sort of stuck in no man's land.
Right.
Like I'm in the center of the bridge, and I don't feel necessarily good or inspired, So we need different tools to get us from survival mode to the middle of the bridge, and different tools to get from the middle of the bridge all the way to creation mode. So we have to build our energy. We have to find a new a new vision for our life, for our health, for whatever it is we're working on. And we have to learn how to build an energy that will get us from gray zone to creation mode. And I think that's an unknown for a lot of people because they don't know that there's different tools that you need to get get out of stress. But in order to not get stuck in that gray zone, like you're talking about, we need different tools that really bring in a new energy and really are very inspiring, So I think that's a fear for a lot of people, and it's really good to talk about it and demystify it because then people know, like, it's safe to leave survival mode and you'll get all the way over, into a new energy that feels so good to you, and there's more energy, there's more energy that is latent potential in our system. So much energy. But typically it just gets zapped by the stressors of life. And there are thoughts and ideas and beliefs and, obviously physical things, food and environmental pollutants and all these things that zap our energy. But when we know how to build our energy, we're building this reserve of inspiration. And I have more energy now at 40 than I did when I was in my 20s because my energy was being zapped by stress response.
I think it gets stuck too because I've noticed the trauma, it makes it get stuck. But then when I go in my body and I start to deal with that, it's like a release of energy. I'm like, whoa, there's a lot of energy here. It just got stuck in this one place in my body and it couldn't continue up.
Exactly. Yeah, learning how to release the energy, how to unlock it. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Cool. Awesome.
So how does yoga play into that?
Yeah, yoga's been awesome. I discovered yoga back in 2014 and at first I was a little bit nervous about yoga because no one I knew did it. And there was lots of judgment around it and people were like, oh, you're going to be practicing Buddhism or something. And I was like, I feel really drawn to trying this. Let me just give it a shot. So I did. And you know how there's a Shavasana at the end of class where you just lay on your back and you're letting all that good work just gel in your body. Best part. I know.
But if you just do that without the work beforehand, then it's not the same.
Exactly. It's the magic of it, right? Yeah. And I just really, while I was laying there in Shavasana at that first class, I just really felt the presence of God and really just could feel this embodiment of I'd cleared a lot of blockages in my system where I was feeling, not just in my mind, but in my body and my heart. And it's like these blocks were sort of cleared through. And so it felt like a very embodied experience with God. And so I thought, man, there's got to be something here. And so as I learned more about yoga, what I really discovered is that the way that it's set up is set up so intuitively for not just the physical body, but for the emotional body to be able to clear through some of the blocks that we tend to get in our system. And because of the breath work, that's very intentional, right?
That's part of it.
Yeah, and then working with it does work to some degree with the energy centers of the body, which are centers of light and information. That when those are cleared, we're a lot clearer in our system. They're centers of intelligence.
You can say chakras on my podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I call them energy centers mainly because I don't want anyone to have an automatic way to talk about those things. I'm like, guys, they're like miniature brains. Don't freak out. They're miniature brains of light and information. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. And I mean, things like heart math and Joe Dispenza is finding the science behind how different organs in our body have intelligence in them and the gut and how they speak to the brain and they're thinking and they're working for us as well. And I mean, obviously we know that all our organs are working for our body. So it just makes sense.
Absolutely. It really does. There's lots of intelligence that is in the physical body and the energetic body that I didn't even know was there. It's like mining for gold. It's very exciting, just knowing the gut intelligence and the heart intelligence and the pineal gland and there's all this really cool intelligence. And if we live in fear, we'll never get to discover that, right? But if we understand that we're safe and that we can have discernment. You know, discernment's different than fear. You know,
right.
discernment has a different energy than fear. Then, you know, what God showed me was like, when you're not living in fear, you're just living in my love. The world is like a playground of possibility.
Yeah.
And I love that, because I'm like, we don't have to be worried about like, you know, the enemy around every bush. We can be like, wow, let's head towards what is really life-giving, and anything that's not, we'll have a sense about it, especially the clearer we are, right?
Right.
It doesn't help us to not be clear in these energy centers of our body, to not be clear in our intelligence and these different centers of intelligence, for those to be blocked in any way. So yoga was also a really great part of my healing journey, because it really helped integrate the body with the nervous system, with my mind and my spirit. And really, yoga just means yoke. Yoking these different aspects of our being together, where you can feel it all together. And so there's still people that judge me for doing yoga, but it's okay. I'm like, why don't you just try it and just, see what you think. But if you don't want to, it's okay. I love you. But I do encourage people to try it before they, judge it, because it is so healing. And I think you have to look at the fruit of anything what's the fruit, you know?
Yeah.
And the fruit has been incredibly healing for me on so many levels. And so that was a big part of not just helping integrate mentally and emotionally and physically, but helped me with my eating disorder, really helped me with just feeling embodied. And, my body image, that was part of helping shift that. That was one of the somatic experiences that really helped. And so yeah, I love yoga and really movement in general.
Yeah.
But I'm not a fan of movement that pushes people to not really be embodied, kind of get stuck in the head and ignore what's going on in the body. Any movement should help people feel their bodies, not disconnect from the bodies.
I think that would be something that pushes them too hard or too much. I think it's good. Like I like lifting weights sometimes. But if you do it too much, or too hard, then again, it's that you're at war with your body, because your body's like, this is too much. And you're like, no, I need to just keep pushing myself. And then that creates a really unhealthy relationship with your body and disassociates from it.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't need to give our power away to the number on the scale, or the amount of reps we're supposed to do, or the minutes we think we should do, or a certain number of miles, or we don't need to give our power away to that. We need to be tuned into the power that's in the body and keep the breath work going and be connected to the body. Learn how to calm the nervous system down, so that it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's really more of the state of being that you're in while you're doing it. So I don't care what people do, so long as they know how to breathe, they know how to calm their nervous system, and they are not giving their power away to some external stimulus, right?
Right. And external, like you said, I want to look this certain way, or blah, blah. It's like, I can say I want to look better, but not get stuck in, I have to look this certain way. It's more about my health than an image that I want that is tied to my ego and my self-image and what other people think.
Exactly. Yeah. Because the ego pushes, but the spirit draws. So like, it doesn't mean that someone who's in this work couldn't look amazing, right? Or couldn't really want to feel incredibly strong in their body. But are you doing it in a way that's really healthy and life-giving? Or are you doing it in a way to compete, or or is it ego-based? Is it pushing, or is it life-giving? And I think what we have to do is notice the energy of it, right? What's the energy? Is it inspiring? Is it taking you upward? Or is it that pushy kind of, I want to be better than that person, or I need to look a certain way in order to feel valuable? What's the energy? And I think when we ask ourselves that question, we will know for ourselves, is this a healthy thing,
Right.
Because, I don't just do yoga. I play soccer once a week. I do the Spartan, obstacle,
so fun.
course races.
I want to try that.
Yeah, you'd be great at it. Yeah. And run and, lift weights with my husband. I want to do all the things now because it just feels fun. And now my body is not, it's not sabotaging me. It doesn't feel stressful to exercise. It feels liberating.
Right.
But that's a big shift, right?
Yeah. And when you can get into that healthy mode, then you can be like, oh, how much can I achieve? Can I push myself in a fun way, but also you're in tune with your body, so you're not overdoing it and, creating unhealthy. It's a healthy form of pushing yourself to see how far you can go.
Exactly. Yeah. For example, when I, several years ago, I could not run more than like half a mile and hate it. Like I hated it. It was really bad. Yeah. I was like, running just felt horrible to me. And I kind of had I'd sort of labeled myself as not a runner. And so I was in that kind of stress mode or whatever. And so I started doing some of this work on my relationship with exercise, but also my relationship with running. And I started just seeing the visual in my mind of myself running and feeling the feeling of feeling light and free and energized and happy.
Yeah.
And really working with my nervous system to link that visual and that feeling.
Yeah.
And I would do it with my eyes closed and just kind of feel it. And I just, would do the work on it, right? And get into that inspiring energy, right? That inspiring feeling.
Change your relationship to how you feel about running and connecting with that good picture of running it and how it could feel good. And your body's like, oh, I can kind of feel that. So then I can get in line with allowing you to run and have this good relationship with it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it wasn't long after that it just naturally, like, kind of organically fell into place that someone started training me to, working on like my technique and all that, and just did a little bit of that. And then I just focused on staying in the energy of that inspiration, keeping my nervous system calm. And I found I could run faster or I could run farther. And I was like, oh, I can do 2 miles. Maybe I can do 3 miles. And, like the other night I ran 5 and it felt great.
Wow.
And that's a big thing for me because I'm quote unquote not a runner.
Right.
Like, it's not necessarily my body type or whatever, but it felt light and it felt free and it felt inspiring, So I think we're all capable of way more than we think we are. We just have to change the energy. We have to clear the blocks and we have to learn how to get the nervous system in a state of peace so that it feels fun, know?
Right.
And of course you have to show up for yourself every day, right? You have to show up and you have to, put in the time, but it is not from the energy of I'm trying to be something. It's more the energy of like, I just want to experience this. Like what's possible, right?
That's beautiful. That's great.
Thanks.
And that, I think that lesson in yoga is stretching yourself and and whatever exercise, or then it translates into life in whatever forms. It's like whatever comes our way, how can we get an attitude of what does this have for me, and how can this stretch me and grow me, and how can I be in a attitude of appreciation or love or joy, or like you're saying about like our traumas or whatever, like when bad stuff is raised, it's a message for us, for telling us know what we need to work on. So how can we carry that attitude in exercise into the rest of our life?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that what I encourage people to do, if there's any area of their life that they don't love, like they don't feel they're thriving in, that could be an area of their relationship with food, or it could be an area of like their relationship with another person. It could be area of finances or work, anything you want to create change in, right? What I encourage people to do is to start with their relationship with it on more of an internal basis. So instead of working out, let's work in first. So let's look at what are the energies surrounding this issue, because you can pretty much know the areas where you have truth-based beliefs are the areas where your life is going to feel like flow, and the areas where you have false beliefs or negative beliefs or stuck energy are the areas where your life feels stuck. So that's kind of how we know, right? So the areas where things are stuck are the areas where we just need to bring that lightness to it. We need to bring the new energy to it. So if we do the inner work first, so for example, we clear the blocks, and you could use lots of different modalities for it. I love the tapping meditation, heart coherence combination, just because I think it touches the different elements that need to be worked on. Mm-hmm. It gets you all the way across the bridge, so to speak.
Right.
I really love that process, but any kind of modality that communicates to the nervous system, it has to get deeper than just the conscious mind, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Lots of people think if I know it, I should be able to do it. And that's not true. Mm-hmm. It will get stuck in the iceberg above mm-hmm. the surface. You'll never be able to dive off and really get into the entire iceberg, which is your entire body and subconscious mind, right? And subconscious. So if we start with changing the energy, and whatever modalities you want to use to change the energy, if you start with that and then you surrender the outcome, like you really open your heart to not doing the same thing that you've done, for a long time, mm-hmm. you're like, maybe I need to look at this in a different way. And I tell people all the time, the number one nutrient needed for health is just openness. Whether that's physical health or emotional health. I mean, openness with discernment, of course, right? But openness to looking at things a different way, mm-hmm. openness to maybe new tools or new modalities that can help them. If you're just open, then there's a chance that you can shift this energy. And once you shift that energy, you really things will fall into place in ways that you can't imagine, right? But we're blocked off because mm-hmm. we're like I was, in my 20s, where I'm like, the only way I can fix this eating disorder is through prayer and nutrition, right? Mm-hmm. I was stuck. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's as far as I can get, and I'm frustrated. And I keep begging God to heal me when he's like, no, I'm actually leading you to something life-giving. So I just encourage people to work, to be open and to do the inner work first, because there's lots of books out there about how to change habits. Some I really love, some I really don't love, but there's lots of tools that can help on a practical level. But what lots of people aren't talking about is the spiritual art of change, right? Which is shifting the energy, working through those blockages, mm-hmm. having a new vision and inspiration, and then really learning how to surrender that outcome so the right people or situations can come to you at the right time. Mm-hmm. And that's like the magic of our spiritual life, right? Mm-hmm. Is this like, wow, how's God going to show up for me today? Mm-hmm. What's going to pop into my life today that's going to take me in this new direction? Mm-hmm. It's really fun, and it's inspiring.
Yeah. I think you've really been touching on kind of the Holy Spirit and how that a big part of how the Holy Spirit talks to us is through our bodies. Our body is the temple which the Holy Spirit resides in, but also God is in everything. And so how can we be open to how is the Holy Spirit talking to us through other people, through our body, through our life circumstances, just infinite ways, really.
Yeah, I love that. So, I'll just give my thoughts on this because I know that, everyone maybe has a different lens. So I encourage people to take whatever they want to take from it and flick away anything mm-hmm. that doesn't resonate. But where I'm at with this is I feel like we've gotten a lot more boxy with God than we need to.
Yeah.
And we really need to consider extricating ourselves from a dualistic kind of ideology mm-hmm. into a much more integrated and whole ideology around God, right? So what this means for a lot of people is we've boxed God into not just maybe church, like when I go to church, I'm connected to God, mm-hmm. or into certain quote unquote spiritual practices like prayer mm-hmm. or worship, or Bible reading. There is this separation between church and life, right? Mm-hmm. Or church and health, or God mm-hmm. and health. And I noticed this early on, and it really kind of frustrated me. It made me very uncomfortable because I just felt like I've experienced that God can be in many things, mm-hmm. right? That God is in us and all around us and is not up there, out there somewhere. It's mm-hmm. more so integrated. And the farther down this path I go, the more I see this integration of the Holy Spirit being present in and through everything.
Yeah.
So it gets really fun when you start to think about, like, what if this quantum field that, like, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, what if that quantum field is really the spiritual field, right? And we can learn how to connect with it and tap into it, right? It's not a force, like a separate from the person of God, but it's an aspect, right? And of course, there could be lots of ideologies. I don't want to, like, tamper with anyone's, like, sacred cows or anything like that. These are just my thoughts. But I'm like, what if, like, we found that there's this, science has shown that there is an energy in everything, right? So you have things that are man-made that are going to be vibrating at a lower frequency, and they're more dead, right? But then you get things that are alive and they're vibrating at a higher frequency. Those things are very life-giving. They have a life force energy, right? You could call it chi or prana or just energy. It doesn't really matter what the word is. The thing itself is the same. It's a vibration. And so I just finished a course recently with one of my mentors, Natalia Rose, who is just one of the most brilliant teachers out there, I think. And she is really good at looking at the body through the lens of energy and understanding how food and the energetics of food and the energetics of the body. So she's not looking at it so much in terms of, calories and fat grams and, like, more of that medical model. She's looking at it like, what's the energy of the food and what's going on energetically in the body to be able to receive that food.
Yeah. I've heard that, like how, like if a animal is traumatized while dying, that fear that shoots through them, when you eat that, it'll affect you to some degree.
Yeah. So there's a really interesting thing about that, because, animals who are conventionally, processed, there's not a lot of care obviously taken for them in general. Right. There's some real problems with, obviously, our feedlots and the conventional way of meat being,
What is that book? There's a book on that.
Yeah, I think there's several that are super good on this.
Yeah.
But yeah, the adrenaline, the fear energies that course through them right before they're slaughtered, they're present in the animal, along with all the hormones and the additives and all those things that are not great for our body. So when we're ingesting that, we're ingesting not just the physical elements, but we're ingesting the energy of it, the energetic elements. So, and that's not to put fear in anyone. That's just to say that might give you an insight as to, if you were to go from a standard American diet to eating foods that are very high in life force energy, you would probably notice an energetic shift if you did nothing else, right?
Yeah, I can just tell, like, bananas, like, when I eat normal bananas, it kind of make my throat itch. But I eat organic bananas, and I don't feel that, and it feels great.
Exactly. Yeah. So your system is probably fairly sensitive.
Yeah.
To additives. Yeah. And some people really are. They can sense it, and they're just more aware generally, or their body is more sensitized, and they might be like, "Man, I wish it wasn't that way." But it's actually a really good thing, because if your body's like, I want you to hold to this line, it just means that you're gonna be able to access that higher energy a little faster.
Because I do feel energy in my body very often, and I don't think that's a very common thing either. So
yeah, exactly. And just learning how to work with it, learning how to allow it to build, and then knowing how to ground that energy so that it doesn't, like, kind of make you spacey or make you feel like, whoa, I'm in the heavenly places, but I can't get to work on time, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that there needs to be a much more of an integration in terms of the way that we see God and the Holy Spirit in very practical aspects of our life. Not just, if you go to church or in your worship or in your connection and relationship with God, but how that integrates into what you eat, how you eat, your exercise, your relationships, your mindsets around yourself. Like,
becoming more conscious about every part of your life and how that affects you. And,
absolutely. Yeah. And I obviously I came from a very conservative Christian background, so I can, I have both a gratitude for it and I have criticism for the areas of unhealth, you know? And one of the things I found is that that background, unfortunately, can be very fear-based, which we're just not meant to live in fear. Again, meant to live with discernment, but fear is so bad for the body.
Yeah. And it was funny because they almost can... it's like they're trying to be aware of everything, but they're doing it in a way of fear. Whereas maybe the other side is, we don't want to live in fear, so we're not going to be as mindful about everything.
Exactly. You can definitely pendulum swing.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to live in fear, so I'm going to just like throw caution to the wind.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's why, being able to open the different centers of intelligence in the body and know how to do that, and activating your discernment, knowing what that feels like. For example, when I was fairly young, I was probably like 9 or 10, I had a really great first experience with my gut intuition, like just a knowing. It was like my mentor would call it, it's your knower. You have a knower, you have a feeler, and you have a thinker, you know? So your knower just knew beyond any reason for knowing. Like, you just knew something. And I had that pretty early on. I started to try to develop this like knowing that is beyond reason, and it's not a feeling. It's devoid of feeling, right? And this inner knowing is a super important part of our ability to make decisions from an intuitive level, to make spiritually like accurate decisions. And I went through a relationship in my early 30s where my heart was wide open. Like, my heart was just like super open, but my gut intuition kept saying like, this is not good. Like, this is not healthy for you, you know? And I really ignored my gut and kept like tuning into the heart. Now, the heart is super intelligent. It's wonderful, but it needs the balance of the gut intuition and the mind intuition, right? So all of these centers of intelligence need to be opened in our decision making.
Yeah.
And many times people will be much more, they'll be very mental, but they won't have connection to their heart.
Yeah, that's kind of the Western model of focusing on the mental.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to rationalize. We're going to look at this logically and practically. Nothing wrong with that. That's wonderful. You just need to balance the other centers of intelligence. So I think when it comes to not pendulum swinging, not throwing caution to the wind, and being open to new things, learning how to balance that knowing, the feeling, and the thinking, and using all the centers of intelligence, if at all possible, will serve you, really will, you know? So I think that it is very important for us to keep learning the tools to unlock that, so that we can avoid, I mean, if we make a mistake, it's okay. Like, God is in and around us all the time. There's redemption and restoration. Anytime that I've gotten off track, God's always gotten me back on track and restored and redeemed, and it's been great. But like, if we want to avoid like the pitfalls or the detours or whatever, the more we're attuned to that intelligence, the easier it is, you know, to avoid that.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I love the Enneagram. And I've had a podcast about it. I don't want to get too much into that, but
so
you know, there's the feelers, the thinkers, and
the guts.
The gut.
Yes, gut
right.
triad,
And they're all important, and they all have their areas of strength and weaknesses, and so this just helps you kind of understand the relationship and the personalities in that. So yeah, that's great. With dance and the creative arts, I really appreciate those, and I think one of my creative, or the main ways I'm creative, is writing, and I'm actually a little jealous of people like dancers or music or art, whatever, because I think that connects even more with the intuition or the something deeper than words, you know, something that there's more space for what is reality or expression, because words can only capture so much.
So interesting. I've always wanted to be a really great writer, so be grateful that you can write. But yeah, I mean, who knows? You might have more aspects that, you know, of that sort of movement piece of it that you can explore, you know? So
that's true. I again don't want to limit myself, but I guess I want to extend appreciation for that type of creative expression, and I think yoga kind of taps into that to some degree as well.
Definitely dance. You know, like my sister Laura is one of the most artistic, creative, and my sister-in-law Katrina. You know, very artistic, creative in terms of expressing through movement like spiritual truth, and I love that. I'm not called to be a dancer, but you know, it's really cool to not only get to watch it, but also, you know, for people who get to do it, it's one way. It's another way to kind of to move energy, to clear blockages, to express. It's awesome. Yeah.
I wanted to zoom out a little bit. If I was wondering if kind of when you were younger and talk about the body image, and we talked about how culture, you know, gives us this you know, ideal of like what the body should be and beauty and all that stuff. Do you think purity culture, Christian purity culture, also played into that?
Oh, wow. That's a fun one.
Let me just drop that bomb in there.
Yeah, this is not premeditated, so we'll see what comes out. Yeah. You know, I do have a respect for the intent behind purity culture. I'm not a fan. You know, and the reason being is I think it's shame-based. So there's a lot of, at least for me, like my number one challenge in terms of emotional blockage would be shame. And shame, same. As you know, Brene Brown talks about this a lot. She talks about how guilt says, I did something bad, but shame says, I am bad, right? So in my Theophostic sessions, we really had to like kind of tap into that and uncover that that's what it was, because I didn't even know it existed, right? I didn't even know that it was at play in my nervous system and in my beliefs. So shame was really powerful. And if you believe that there's something wrong with you and that you are bad, you will believe that you're going to do something bad.
And your body's bad.
And your body's bad, right. So in terms of a healthy relationship with sexuality, and in terms of a healthy relationship with these, you know, sexual drives that we have, and in terms of relationship with your own body, that has to be healed, right? That has to be looked at and not sort of... you know, I think lots of people think this is an uncomfortable, maybe inconvenient conversation. So let's put that one off to the side and maybe circle back at some time. But it has to be addressed, because if shame is not addressed, nothing, like shame is sort of, not to get off on a rabbit trail, but developmentally, when a child is from about 0 to 2, or, you know, when a child is born all the way up till about 2 years old, that is the sort of developmental time that shame can be introduced. So there's there's naturally in a developmental level, kids are just learning how to be in a body. They're a spirit that's trying to learn how to be in a body. And they're like, what's going on? You know?
This is new.
Right? Yeah. Like, what do I do with all this? You know? And how do I navigate it? And so I think if a parent is living in fear, or they have their own shame, they can definitely reinforce that in a child. And if a child grows up believing like my body's bad, or these things that I'm feeling are bad, there's something wrong with me, then you add on top of that the purity culture of here are these rigid rules of how you need to operate with the opposite gender. And you really need to, you know, save sex for marriage, and you need to make sure that you're... Yeah. And I know that there's some really healthy... healthy structures that I would say, like, I held to when I was, you know, dating and all of that. But it doesn't need to be driven by shame, guilt, or fear. It needs to be driven by what is actually healthy, right? What's a healthy way of relating with the opposite gender? What's a healthy way of relating with your own body? So if you don't work with the shame and guilt, or the shame-based kind of ideologies, then it actually can pendulum swing you the other way, which is kind of what happened to me for a short season, where it took me kind of on a ride. Like, it was like there was suppressed stuff that I didn't even know was there. It took me on this ride, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? So I think what we suppress will come back to bite us unless we actually like know how to work with it. We'd actually confront it.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if you know about there is like the stereotype or the archetype of the homeschooler that's been very suppressed, and then when they finally grow up, they just
they fly off the handle. Oh, I know. We talk about this and we laugh about it. We're like, there's the homeschool, and then there's like the homeschooled, right? Yeah, I can joke about it because I was one for sure, and I think my parents were trying to not they were trying to not be that kind of. What's the word I'm looking for?
Dogmatic.
Yeah, exactly.
Rigid, yeah.
But I think that there's definitely. Here's how I experienced it. Parents so much want their kids to be set apart, and they so much want their kids to be to really be able to find out who they are, and they really want to pull them away from culture.
Right.
We had what we call a separatist culture.
Yeah.
The world is bad, and it's us against the world.
And we're safe here.
Yeah. And so it can get really easy not only to not really know how to integrate with the world, to be like a hothouse plant where you only thrive in one environment, and really not know how to handle some of these things. And so I think it's just really it's really important to create environments, especially if a kid is homeschooled, to create environments where there's really open conversation about things. There's exposure to things. There is navigating through things, or else they will not survive. Right? They'll pendulum swing. They won't know what to do with all the stuff out there. It's like, it's like, don't try to make them a hothouse plant, and then when they're 18. Put them outside and expect them to thrive.
Right.
You can't really do that. You have to slowly help them know how to navigate the world,
Yeah.
So the other thing that culture can do is it can also create a very judgmental kids. Kids are like, everyone else out there is doing it wrong and we're doing it right. And I'm like, we got to watch out for that, guys. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So those are some of my thoughts. I don't know.
Maybe that's like a topic for like a whole podcast.
I know, right? Sounds like we could talk about a lot of things.
Right.
Fun.
Oh, that was great. No, okay. Was there anything that we haven't talked about, that haven't covered, that you wanted to get into?
Yeah, only one more thing that I think is important in the topic of making friends with your body. I'm a really big fan of what I call intuitive eating. So when it comes to nutrition, eating, food, there's a lot of diets out there, and lots of structures that have been sort of set up to try to bring you back to some sort of homeostasis and some sort of centeredness and some sort of health, right? But what I'm a really big fan of is the integration of learning how to clear away the foods that could be really confusing to your body. So i.e. all the standard American diet foods and, the toxic processed foods, so that there's not a lot of clutter in your diet, but to really begin to make friends with your body in terms of listening to it rather than bossing it around. So when someone comes to me and they want to talk about diet and nutrition, I've got lots of things I would love to say about that. But the first thing I'm going to do is really look at not trying to get a person to conform to a particular diet, but helping that person understand how they're wired and connect them to how to notice how foods feel in their body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a whole doorway in itself to making friends with the body.
Yeah. What? I'm going blank right now. What is that Hindu? There's like different body types. And
Ayurveda.
Ayurveda.
Yeah. Ayurveda is awesome. And it's one among many different tools to help people understand the way that they're wired.
Right.
So we look at blood type. We look at, obviously there's age and there's gender and there's background. And there is kind of level of activity, but there's, the body composition types like in Ayurveda and in Chinese medicine. So you're looking at balancing out, the imbalances in the body. And Ayurveda is looking at it from the perspective of like comparing body types to like the elements, like water, earth, fire, and air. And so that can help people kind of understand what's going on inside them, give them tools.
It's a piece.
it's a piece, not the whole thing.
Right.
It's just a little piece. And blood type's a little piece. For women, the hormones is a really important piece because hormonally, women tend to work like in a circle and guys tend to work in more of a straight line. So there's some fluctuation with that for men, but it's not near as like clear as for a woman. So getting clear on some of those elements and then just noticing like how does food feel in my body? That's a way to connect. But what we tend to do is get stuck up in our head, and we've got this diet culture. It's like, okay, here's the food I need to eat at this time of day, and here's how much. Well, what we've done is we've gotten stuck in the head, and we're following this script rather than learning how to be embodied and feel.
Right, because it could change some, and it depends on many factors. So you have to be more intuitive and flexible depending on what the body needs at what time.
Exactly. So I tell people like structure and flow. So structure is, here are the non-negotiables of foods that I won't eat because I know they confuse my system. And the non-negotiables of food I want to make sure I'm having every day, like live foods, and for me, green juices and things like that. And then foods, and then there's the flow, which is when you're eating, how much you're eating, what your body's needing. There's lots of flow in there. You want to have a solid structure and have flow. But I think if people will embrace some level of intuitive eating, that's a doorway to a greater relationship with your body and yourself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's great.
Awesome. Cool. But I think that was it. That was on my list.
Well, thank you so much. We've covered a whole lot. Great stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Kendall. This has been really fun. I haven't, again, gotten to just sort of be stream of consciousness in terms of a conversation about some of this stuff. So really enjoyed it. Yeah,
me too. And I can just, tell that you have so much joy and energy about you that I think that people who work with you, they can tell that you're living you're walking the talk. And so I appreciate you.
Thanks. And thanks for just making space for this time and asking great questions.
Yeah.